and the bond I have also, so every state in the country has got basically everything in America the new refrigerants, whether it be R32 or 454B. So as under the Daikin umbrella, which is going to be your Amana, your Goodman, your Daikin, your McQuay, is all going to be R32 across the line, both with residential and commercial. Now most of the rest of your residential manufacturers in the United States are going 454B for their residential. They're having a hard time adapting 454B for commercial. So you're going to see them putting out commercial systems with R32 and residential systems with 454B, at least until 1234YF gets outlawed. So guys, when you're dealing with these A2L refrigerants, whether it be 32 or 454B, you're not going to see a whole lot of difference in your pressures, your saturations. Nothing's really going to change that much. This is not going to be like the 22 to 410 change where we had vastly different pressures we were dealing with, vastly different superheats, subcoolings, things of that nature. You're not going to see that like you did with that transition. Okay. I had some PT charts around here. I don't know where they went. Y'all go, well, some of y'all see have PT charts. If you look like at a 40-degree coil, you're only about 3 pounds difference in pressure between 410 and R32. So there's not going to be a big change. Guys, this is the tank that we're using, that they finally decided on. This was a big topic of contention for over a year. Originally, we were going to have to refill them. That was the first of the laws. Some lawsuits were filed. Then they were going to have big tanks like this you had to exchange. Some more lawsuits got filed, and it ended up going back to the disposable drums. And so when you're transporting R32, you can transport it, or 454 you can transport it on its side or standing up. A few things here, guys. Number one, the days of throwing your tanks in the back of your truck, letting them roll around in the sunshine are over. These tanks have to be secured in some form or fashion. If you're storing them horizontally, where the burst disc was on your 410A tanks, that is now a pop-off valve, and it will open and close. So if you don't store these tanks with that pointed up, and say it pops off and you start getting liquid flow through that valve, the valve won't close, and you're going to lose all your refrigerant. Okay? So make sure you're securing your tanks, make sure your valves are sticking up. I can kind of go through what all these A1, A2L, all A2s, A3s mean. Because guys, this is all about how they propagate flame. So when you look at A1, which is your 410As, your 22, 12, they'll burn, but they don't flame. So what happens when you burn 410A? Phosgene gas. So, but it doesn't make a flame. It just burns off and creates phosgene gas. When you go to A2L, basically what the L means is that this will burn, but only will burn while the flame is present. So a little bit, I'm going to show you the temperatures at which this stuff actually has to have to ignite. But if you're venting refrigerant and you stick a flame to it, it'll burn, and as soon as you take the flame away from it, it'll stop burning. It has to have a source of flame. And then you go into A2 where they will burn, but they won't explode. And then you go into A3 and that's the stuff that goes through. Propane, ammonia, things of that nature. Right? So, tools, guys, this is going to be your biggest headache. So a little bit, we're going to go through the individual tools. You're going to have intrinsically safe tools, which are A2L rated tools. So we're talking vacuum pumps, recovery machines. You're going to have gauges that have R32, 454 on them. We'll talk about this at length in a little bit. Grounding equipment. most of your modern day equipment, if it's not grounded right, don't work anyway. But it's going to become very important to make sure your equipment is grounded, so you don't end up with something going to ground that's not throwing breakers and doing what it's supposed to and getting really hot, creating fire, things of that nature. So make sure your equipment is grounded. So the equipment is also intrinsically safe. So if anybody's gotten the new furnaces, you've noticed that there's no combustion air levers in the doors. Okay, once we go full bore 32, you're going to have to bring combustion air into your furnaces. So there's a hole. This is not one of them. I couldn't find one here when I set this up, but there's a 4-inch hole in the top right hand corner of your furnace, and it's going to have a boot. It looks like a roof jack boot almost. That'll screw down onto the top of your furnace, and then you've got to stick a 2-inch piece of PVC pipe down to the burner compartment, put a 90 on it, and bring in combustion air that way. There are no requirements as of yet on how long that's got to be, how far away it's got to be. There originally were some, and I guess they found out that they were kind of pointless. So, you don't have to go outside with it. You don't have to do anything crazy like that, like say if you're doing a 96% furnace. But you are going to have to start carrying some 2-inch PVC pipe and some sanitary napkins on your truck for combustion air. Alright, so this AIM is a group of idiots that have caused all this to happen. We've got the new refrigerant. Now this started about 8 or 9 years ago. One thing you have to understand is once they make a change, like a refrigerant change, they have to give us 7 years to transition over to it. Does anybody here know what Chevron difference is? No. Chevron difference is a law. Or was a law. Chevron deference is the Supreme Court ruling that gave government organizations like the EPA, the ATF, the Department of Energy, the Railroad Commission, Fish and Game, the power to make blanket rules based on their interpretation of law. Well, and this has been going on since the late 80s. Well, a bunch of fishermen in Massachusetts challenged Chevron deference before the Supreme Court in March and won. Chevron deference has been done away with. Now, guys, this is very important for us as an industry because, number one, now it gives our organizations like ARI, ACA, the power to go start filing lawsuits about stupid rules that we have to follow. And number two, it makes it where these organizations can no longer make any rules without Congress and Senate voting on them. Because this is a big, big deal, and it got cut out of the news because they did it about 2 days after they overturned Roe versus Wade. So you didn't hear anything about it. But it's probably the biggest news to come out of the Supreme Court in the last 10 years because it takes a lot of power away from all these government organizations. So hopefully we don't get any more stupid stuff like this for a while. But guys, I'm going to tell you right now, that all depends on who gets voted in the office. Right? So think about who you're voting for. So if you're looking at the phase down of 410A, in 2022 we dropped production by 10%. This year they have to drop by 40% by December 31st. And then you see 2029, 70, 34, 80, 36 to 15%. Guys, this is going to cause the price of 410 to go through the roof. Just like 22 did, only faster. Guys, it is very, very, very important that we start recovering and recycling refrigerants. Guys, to be honest with you, that's why we're in this way, because we didn't do what we should have done. If we would have been recovering 410 and turning it in and doing all that stuff like we were supposed to, that would have given them no leverage to do this. We were 175 times the menace loss in the United States. Everybody understand understand what I mean by that?
Yes.
Okay, we've vented 170 times more refrigerant than what we should have. And that was how they got this put through. Guys, there is no drop-in for 410A. There will be no dry ship units. None of that stuff like we had with 22. So the more refrigerant that you're recycling and turning in, the longer we can keep the price down on 410A. Because there's no law that says we can't recycle or remanufacture. Stop venting refrigerant. When you do a change out, stop pumping them down and taking them somewhere and dumping the charge. Recover it, bring that refrigerant and turn it in. And the cost of 410A is going to go through the roof very fast. Even with your 32 and your 454B, we have to recover this refrigerant. If we don't, and we go down the same path we did with 410A, guys, the next step is propane and ammonia. That's the only thing left. So we have got to change the way we do things to prevent these idiots from making our lives even more difficult. Right? Everybody know what GWP is? Global warming potential. It's the new religion of the left. Right? This is what they're using as a meter to change our refrigerants. The next, we're under 700 right now, so the next one they're talking is going to be under 250. The only thing we have will do that is ammonia and propane.
132 won't do that. I think it's what?
It is 454. Yeah, one of them's 590 and the other one's 646.
Yeah, 646.
But guys, we can help prevent this from happening by good practices in the field. Okay? Alright, now to get rid of some myths. Number one, none of this refrigerant has propane in it. It's dimethylbutylene, it's not propane. We're abundantly clear on that. Number two, 454B is 70% R32. So all the BS that you're reading on the internet and you're seeing coming out of DuPont and Honeywell about how our refrigerant is going to explode and this, that, and the other, what you're going to find is their ignition rate is actually lower than ours, and 70% of their refrigerant is our refrigerant. Now guys, this is something you're going to have to deal with homeowners, because this stuff is all over the internet. So you're going to have to be able to go in and make an educated argument to your customers that this doesn't have propane in it, their houses are not going to blow up. Okay? The refrigerant, for it to blow their house up, they have to have a completely sealed house and get it pressurized and then have a flame put to it while that pressure is being let out. Okay? Like, I can't imagine a scenario where you could do that. So here is one of the tests they did, the first test they did at the factory, where they put a bunch of candles in front of a floor mount unit and poked a hole in it and let the refrigerant run out. As you can see, basically all that happened is the flame got a little bit bigger on the candles. Guys, I seen them do this with over 100 pounds of it in a room with way more candles than that, and it was the same result. To make this stuff burn, it has to be going from high pressure to low pressure, like an aerosol can, basically. Or if you open up your tank and stuck a flame to it, yeah, it's going to burn. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, this stuff does act like propane in the instance that it collects, it's heavier than air, so it's going to collect down close to the ground. So if you're in a tight attic, especially, and you get some kind of major leak, you need to be ventilating that refrigerant out with a fan or something. We don't know what it's going to do if you breathe it. More than likely you'll get stoned, just like you do with the other refrigerant. If you breathe it. That was not a suggestion. But make sure if you're in a closed, like especially tight attics, if you've got a major leak on something, that you ventilate it out and get it out of the attic.
So I was in another training, you know, I go in and attend other people's trainings, and Daikin actually has a video on YouTube that they're not allowed to use in the United States because we're like lawsuit happy. But if you go on your own time and Google or get on YouTube and look up Daikin R32 flammability test, it's a guy from Daikin, from the Daikin YouTube page, YouTube South America, and he opens up a bottle of R32 with a flame, and he shows you turning it up, turning it down, making the flame bigger, making the flame smaller. At no point does it combust. So on your own time, if you have any questions or if you think that it's not true looking at slides, there's a video on YouTube from Daikin that shows the flammability.
Like a cigarette lighter flame, not hot enough to ignite. Just a flame on ignite. So, good segue into this one. Guys, it takes 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit to ignite. What is the only thing we carry that gets to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit? Torches. I.e., if you set this stuff on fire, you're doing something stupid. Okay? This is what I find funny. Theirs is 925 degrees, and they claim ours is way more flammable than theirs. It's all the same thing, basically, guys. Okay? So, kind of getting into the components of these refrigerants. So 32 is a single component refrigerant, just like R22 was. Okay? So what does that mean for you in the field? The first and most important thing is you can charge it as a vapor. Now for you guys that have never worked on anything with 410 in your entire lives, this is going to be a big deal. This is going to cut down on your overcharging of systems dramatically. What is the number one callback on a heat pump after install? Besides the drain line.
Too much refrigerant.
Oh, that's right. This is Houston. Y'all don't believe the heat pumps here.
Too much refrigerant. Too much refrigerant.
Overcharge. Why do we overcharge heat pumps so much? So much more than we do straight cooling systems.
You're not supposed
What
to
components are in a heat pump outdoor unit that are not in an air conditioner?
reversing valve.
Reversing valve? What else? You need to shut up.
I don't know, how was that?
Reversing valve? Accumulator? What else? XV.
Yeah.
What's the point of an accumulator?
To hold refrigerant
Cold refrigerant, what state?
in a liquid.
In a liquid state. What do you charge in a system with 410 as? A liquid. So where do you think, if you're not using your true suction, which I can guarantee none of us do because it's too damn slow, where do you think all that liquid's going? Into your accumulator. And it sits there.
Influence.
It sits there. It sits there. Because especially when you're installing on days like today, or where you might have to go into heat mode at night, then it flushes all that refrigerant out and you're overcharged. By charging with a vapor, you're going to see a reaction to the refrigerant you're putting in there much, much quicker. Whether it be straight cooling or a heat pump. But guys, I'm going to tell you this. If you've got a drum of refrigerant on your truck that you're using, you better have a set of scales on your truck too. This is another place we get in trouble all the time. Now, I always tell the story because it's hilarious. But about 4 or 5 years ago, I was down in the valley on an inverter system down at Brownsville. And the guy was like, yeah, I put 2 or 3 pounds in it. Well, as soon as I pulled the computer up on it, I could see it was overcharged. So I told him, I said, let's recover all the refrigerant. And he's like, oh, well, I said, no, go get a recovery tank. I said, tanks. They're talking about a 3-ton system. I took 27 pounds of refrigerant out of the 3-ton system.
27.
And he said, oh, he goes, I only put a couple pounds in it. You have no idea how much refrigerant you're putting in the system if you don't have scales on it. So if you call somebody like me and you've been talking about, well, I've been adding refrigerant, and I ask how much refrigerant you added, and you're like, I don't know about, the first next thing out of my mouth is gonna be to cover all the refrigerant you ever said scale. Guys, the way, the future of charging systems is gonna be weighing refrigerant in, based on your line set points. You need to make sure you've got scales on your trucks. The other thing about 32 is if you have a leak, and you pump it, say you pump it down and repair that leak, you can now just dump new refrigerant on top of it. 454, if you have a leak, you've got to evacuate the whole system, use virgin refrigerant to put back in. You cannot top off 454B because of its chemical makeup. So now you're talking about a more expensive refrigerant that you have to have 60% more of to accomplish the same goal that you can with R32. And every time something happens, you've got to dump the charge to recharge it. Kind of makes you wonder why anybody's using 454. The other problem with 454, about the only way you can make it work is through a microchannel coil.
So are they just using 454 to replace their,
Money. DuPont's got to get, DuPont Honeywell got to get their pound of flesh. It's all about money. All of this is about money, guys. Every day. Even the refrigerant change is about money.
Yeah.
Down to the tools?
Huh?
Down to the tools, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm not to call you a liar if you repeat this, but I almost promise you on your vacuum pumps and your recovery machines are probably the same machines. They just stand they do well. I don't know that for a fact, but I've got a sneaky suspicion.
The only difference with that is pump is it's supposed to have a fully enclosed motor to be spark free.
Right. Well,
weren't they supposed to be like DC too?
yeah, they're supposed to be inverters. Like all the ones we sell are the motors are inverters.
Inverter vacuum motor?
Huh?
Inverter vacuum motor?
Yeah, the vacuum pump and the recovery machines all.
So can I use that vacuum for 410A?
Yeah, you can use vacuum pump. Guys, any A2L tools can still be used on 410A. So it ain't like you gotta carry 5 different sets of everything on the truck. They're all different for it. Alright, so the other thing with 32 is, guys, this is not a new refrigerant. The world started going over to 232 the same time we went to 410A. And then there was about a 6 or 7 year transition in every continent except North of Latin America. We're using R32 except the United States. Okay, so this stuff's been around forever. This is nothing new. It's in probably close to 250 million systems across the world right now. So we're not dumping something that's never been used on like 454. Alright, so guys, with your heat pumps, you're not going to see a whole lot of difference in installing. Now, furnaces, on the other hand, yeah, there's some pretty major changes. So we've already talked about having to have the outside air brought in. So right now, we have the 32 outdoor units and coils, but we don't have the R32 furnaces yet. So if you're having to do an install, we have to have the Dragonfly, which is this setup back here, if any of you stop and look at it. Now, what the Dragonfly does is there's a leak detector from the factory mounted inside your coil. And it plugs into that Dragonfly. Your outdoor unit and your thermostat hook into the green plug on the Dragonfly, and then the black plug goes out to your furnace. So basically what this thing does is if this thing picks up refrigerant, it will kill the thermostat in the outdoor unit, and then it'll send a signal every 5 minutes to bring the blower on. Now guys, there's another piece that has to go in here that we just found out about, but I haven't had time to put this training in, and it is the zoning adapter. So if you have a system, a gas furnace that is zoned, or actually it doesn't matter if it's an air handler or a gas furnace, if you've got a zoned system, you will have to have this to run your zone dampers through. And what it does is, if this sensor picks up refrigerant, it kills your zoning system and forces all your dampers wide open. and then again brings the fan on in 5-minute increments. If you have a heat producing IEQ product, it will also have to be run through this so it can shut it off in the event of a leak. Now guys, while I think all this is probably pointless, it is the law. So if you don't do it, and say that house burns down, whether it has anything to do with your furnace or air conditioner or not, they're gonna come after you. So guys, we have to make sure we're doing all this stuff. Right? Don't scream at me, call your congressman or your senator. I didn't make these rules. So the Dragonfly pretty much works with everything, whether it's a communicating or non-communicating system, heat pumps, dual fuels, whatever. Now, it comes with a book, it's got all your wiring diagrams in it. This is what these are. I just basically took pictures of the manual, and it has all your wiring diagrams in it. I've already got a few phone calls, how do I wire this thing up? I'm gonna start answering. You open the book and look at the wiring diagram. Alright, there's no retrofit kits for air handlers or box coils. Now guys, where this is gonna become a real nightmare is when you're having to replace, say under warranty, a 410A outdoor unit. Then the customer is more than likely gonna have to purchase a new coil or a new air handler. And the Dragonfly. And this is gonna get real ugly. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. Have we actually ever got anything in writing? None of it matters till we get it in writing.
Yeah, I would say if you have a condenser in the coil that's under 10 years old that has factory warranty for a unit replacement, we have to give you the newest equivalent. So if you have a 15-SEER Amana that has a lifetime warranty, we're going to give you a 15-SEER r32 Amana that has a lifetime warranty. If you have a 10-year coil that has a unit replacement, we have to give you the newest coil that has a unit replacement.
No, we haven't gotten it in writing from legal yet. But I have a lot of daily contact with the factory, and that's where I'm afraid it's going to go. We've already seen it with some mini splits, where we've had to replace mini split outdoor units for whatever reason. We didn't have the 410A unit, and they've had to buy the wall mount air handler. Please don't shoot the messenger. Guys, this is not a man or train or carrier or anybody else causing this. This is not your distributors causing this. This is the federal government. So when your homeowners freak out, which you know they're gonna do, you're gonna have to learn this term. These are federally mandated changes we have no control over. Keep saying it's the federal government. And then tell them to stop letting Democrats.
You always have the option of replacing compressors. You don't have to replace
Yeah.
the entire unit.
Yes, and guys, last night I spent from 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon to after midnight last night doing our new OEM parts. And I'm gonna get compressor heavy after the first of the year before they pay compressors. So if you're in a situation like that and a homeowner really balks, you can replace the compressor. So leak mitigation, that's just a fancy term for, hey, we've got leak detectors in the system. Make sure you're hooking them up. So your Dragonfly and all your air handlers have this sticker on the outside of them. So it tells you what all the blinking lights mean for leak detection. If it detects a leak, your thermostat will lose power, unless it's got batteries in it. If you got a straight R common thermostat with no batteries, it's gonna kill 24 volts of the thermostat. Alright, now tools. So, 4 or 5 months ago, guys, I stripped every non-A2L refrigerator tool out of their supply, other than what you might see on a clearance rack. Everything that you see in here, recovery machines, vacuum pumps, gauges, everything is A2L rated, all of it. So, with your gauges, if you're using analogs, okay, you do not have to throw your whole gauge body away and everything else. I brought in replacement gauges that have 410, R32, and R454 on them. So you can literally just take the gauges off and replace them. Alright, it's the same oil, so we're not worried about oil transitioning between them and causing acids. Now, recovery machines, you're gonna have to make sure your recovery machines are R32 rated. Guys, if you bought a recovery machine in the last couple of years, before you go buy another one, get on the website of the manufacturer, put the model number in it, and see if yours is A2L rated before you go spend a bunch of money. Okay? Then you're gonna have to have an adapter, and guys, it doesn't look like this. I wrote this class before, they announced the new adapters. It looks like a mini split adapter. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? It's because your tanks are left-handed threaded, so anything over an A1 by federal law has to have left-handed threads on it, like your propane tanks, your oxyacetylene, or your acetylene tanks, all those have left-handed threads. It's the same law. Now, I had brought in the mini split looking adapter thing for them, and I also have hoses out there that are left-handed thread on the bottom side. So you can buy the charging hose, or you can get an adapter, either one.
With the probes, is there something for the probes? I mean, the adapter?
So I make sure 12 probes,
Claims.
make sure refrigerant probes.
Those are, your units are still right-handed thread.
Okay.
Just the tank is left-handed.
Okay.
No, you don't have to adapt the unit. Like, could you imagine the nightmare that would turn into?
That's what I thought. But
Yeah. Fire extinguishers. Guys, it's already a law, you're supposed to be carrying fire extinguishers around on your truck. You need to have fire extinguishers with you, especially if you're in somebody's house doing welding. They have to be within arm's length of where you're welding. Now, combustion analyzers, guys, I personally probably wouldn't go buy one of these. I just buy a leak detector because they're accomplishing the same goal. So vacuum pumps is the next one. Again, if you bought a vacuum pump in the last year or so, go on the manufacturer's website and make sure it's not already A2L rated before you go buy another one, because I have seen a lot of boxes that don't have A2L wrote on them, but then when you look the pumps up, they're showing in their specs to be A2L rated. So again, check before you go spend that money. And then leak detectors. Now, we had no A2L leak detectors except fill teeth when we started this, and we still have no A2L leak detectors except fill teeth. I've got a couple of different options for fill teeth in there for you to purchase if you need a leak detector. The torch top models, which none of y'all are probably carrying, you can't use anyway.
You know the infrared leak detector is safe for you to watch?
We'll have to look it up. Some are, some aren't. It depends on what the heated diode is in them. Now, guys, today, if you buy anything with A2L run on it, Aaron's gonna give you a 10% discount on any tools you need to pick up purchase today, on top of the discounts that we've already got on them. So especially if you're buying packages of stuff for a truck, we have some pretty good discounts on stuff, and if you buy it today, we'll give you another 10% off. And Aaron will do it and put his name on it, so I don't control it. Please tell me none of y'all are doing this, so I don't have to talk about it. Y'all even know what this is? None of y'all evidently ever worked on with the units? Please don't do this. Alright, ventilation, just kind of recap. Make sure you got proper ventilation when you're dealing with this refrigerant. Purging with nitrogen. Alright. So if you're not purging right now today with nitrogen while you're welding, you're gonna start. This is not only a safety thing, guys. With modern day metering devices, especially EEDs and LEDs, if you don't do it, you're gonna plug your metering devices up. What is the number one reason TXVs fail?
Non-condensers?
Not, yeah, trash. This is what happens when we don't pull proper vacuums, when we don't clean our line sets before we do a change out, when we don't purge the nitrogen while we're welding. Guys, just about every call I get with somebody complaining about TXV, I start asking questions, and they haven't done their jobs where they were supposed to. We have got to start doing things the proper way. This new equipment, think of it this way, the more SEER rating goes up, the more careful with the equipment you have to be. You start talking about inverters, S-series, and a lot of even your two-stage stuff. This isn't, there's the days of going and throwing the stuff in and leaving it over. You have got to make sure you're doing everything by the book, or you're gonna end up having problems. And guys, I don't care whose name's wrote on it. I don't care who you're selling. Train, Carrier, Linux. If you don't do proper install practices, you're gonna have a nightmare on your hands to deal with. Alright, so any of y'all that don't have my phone number, there it is. I am your direct contact for technical support. And when I am not around, I have a team of guys backing me up now. It's no longer just me like it used to be. Y'all have any questions on any of this?
Will this refrigerant apply to refrigeration in the future?
I don't know. I have never even looked in refrigeration. There was another refrigerant in all of this that I don't know what is. I don't know refrigeration, so I don't know, but you might want to look into that. There's another new refrigerant. There's three of them on
And I
there.
figured if they were doing it for air conditioning, they were trying to do the same thing for.
You don't really see 410A in refrigeration.
Yes, never. It's always 404, 102, or.
Because, well, it has to do with efficiency of refrigerant, which I didn't really talk about. Guys, do y'all understand what efficiency of refrigerant is and how it's measured?
No. Explain.
Thank you for saying that. Usually everybody just sits there with one thing like this. All right, the way you measure the efficiency of a refrigerant is how much heat has to be absorbed into that refrigerant or rejected out of that refrigerant to make it undergo a state change. Right? So guys, in a coil, let's say an evaporator coil, what's the state of the refrigerant that should be entering your evaporator coil?
A liquid. It enters as a liquid.
It's a liquid, right? So then we evaporate that refrigerant into a vapor, correct? Okay, so to make this easy, what temperature does water freeze? 32 degrees. Now guys, if you're if you put a probe in a glass of ice water, I'll spit it out now. What is the temperature you're gonna read?
32 degrees.
You're gonna read 32 degrees. So why is that water not ice? If water freezes at 32 degrees, and you put cubes of water in ice, and you stick a thermometer in it, it's 32 degrees, why is that water not ice?
The outside, withholding the water.
Because once we reach 32 degrees, or saturation, we then have to remove another 144,000 BTUs of latent heat per calorie out of that water to make it undergo a state change. Now, does removing that heat change the temperature? No.
Just change.
It changes state. So guys, this is how an air conditioner works. The vast majority of the energy that you're absorbing and rejecting in the refrigerant during the refrigerant cycle is latent energy. It's not changing the temperature of the refrigerant. It's changing its state. So the more energy that it takes to change the state of the refrigerant, the more efficient it is, i.e. the less volume we have to use. So when you look at, say, 410 as opposed to 32, we can use 40% less R32 to accomplish the same goal we were accomplishing with 410A. Does that make sense? Guys, you're gonna see the footprints for outdoor units is smaller, not bigger. When you look at 410A as opposed to 454, it takes, it's either 10 or 20% more 454 to accomplish the same goal that you do with 410A. So it's it's almost a no-brainer to me as to why you would use a 454 unit over a 32 unit. Footprint's gonna be smaller, less refrigerant, and it's cheaper.
Single ownership.
Single
ownership is less work.
Less work, right. Less chance of callback. Any other questions? You're all like water, you group yesterday.
When are they gonna be done selling 410?
We cannot sell full systems after January 1st, 2026. So we've got to sell through next year. But manufacturing of 410A units stops January 1st. Pretty much, I don't even think we're manufacturing anything now that's 410.
They're just finishing like contracts, builder contracts and multi-family contracts.
I just tried to find a 2-ton, they're done. They're done.
Oh yeah, if
with
you
410.
like, especially if it's a single stage, yeah, you're done. You're not gonna find it. I don't even know how much single stage 410 like we have in the company.
Very little. We got a lot of R32 now.
Yeah, we're getting R32 into the hot heavy right now.
How about some of the myths or stories that y'all have heard either about R32 or R454B? Anything that y'all have heard out there just from talking to other people in the business?
That you're gonna have to change the ductwork.
Okay, you need to check, the ductwork has nothing to do with refrigerant. Guys, the ductwork has to do with the fact that for the last 40 years, we have not been doing ductwork properly in the state of Texas. Static pressure is static pressure, it doesn't matter what the refrigerant is. Guys, if you're putting in modern day equipment and you're not checking your static pressures when you're done, especially with a change out, 8 times out of 10, you're probably gonna end up with a callback, especially if it's got an ECM motor. Guys, PSC motors are gone. The days of, oh, we can hook a tube to it and leave, and they will never notice, are gone. These motors are measuring not technically, but in essence, are measuring static pressure. How many of you ever gotten a B3 air code on a man air handling furnace? Yeah. If you see B3 codes, you don't have enough turned up. You have to understand the difference between the way modern day blower motors operate and the old PSC motors. With a PSC motor, that motor just spins at a given RPM. So if you're lacking return on a PSC motor, the motor slips through the air and it just moves when it moves. Now the funny thing about this is there's kind of a window in there with the homeowner. It's going to make the house more comfortable because it's going to dehumidify ungodly. The air is going to be coming out really, really cold if you get in that sweet spot where it doesn't completely screw the unit up and shut it off on pressure switch. But what does happen is you're tracing liquid into your compressor, and then over time it starts damaging it. Now the lifespan of your unit goes to nothing. Okay? Now, when you look at modern day motors don't spin at a given RPM. They're constant volume. So if that unit says, you got a 5-ton unit that says, hey, like ours is like 1970 CFM on a 5-ton, that motor is gonna do whatever the hell it has to do to produce that 1900 CFM. Well, the only way you can do that is by spinning faster. Okay? So when you're lacking return, that motor keeps ramping up, keeps spinning faster and faster and faster. Now your air velocity goes through the roof. And the first thing we generally see is you'll install a unit and the first call you're gonna get is, hey, this system's not being notified. I get that call every day of my life. Every day, 7 days a week. Oh, wow, we just put in this new 2-stage, blah, 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 it ain't dehumidifying. The first thing out of my mouth is always gonna be, go get me a return stack. And almost 100% of the time, it's not dehumidified because it don't have enough return. Because that air is now moving so fast across that coil that there's literally not time to absorb the heat out of it to make a water condense. That make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. So guys, we really see it in upflows. We're shortly gonna come to a time when we're not gonna be able to do upflows unless we have a freaking mechanical room to go in. Because you simply cannot get the unit high enough off the ground or get enough return on it to keep the static pressure down. We have to check these things out. You would think of a job like mine, oh, he deals with broken, bad equipment, blah, blah, blah. No, 97% of my job is telling people you don't have enough ductwork. I kid you not. And it's the killer. And it's funny how Texas is literally the air conditioning capital of the world. There's more ACs here per capita than there is anywhere else in the world. And we find more ways to screw stuff up than we can think of. Flex duct. Now, flex is not ductwork. They shouldn't call it flex duct. It's just flex. Flex is a sound attenuator. When flex was invented, it was never meant to be run more than 3 or 4 feet. In a commercial application to keep these grills from rattling. That's what it was invented for. And we use it for ductwork. I don't care who you are, or what you think you know, you have no idea how much air is flowing through that duct.
You know, I was always wondering that the farmers would use commercial.
Yeah, that's what it was invented for.
And it would only be 3-4 feet of that.
Yeah,
That's a flex.
Guys, when I started in this industry, that was the only place flex was ever used. That and mobile homes. Right? So the only way we know for sure what a duct system is doing, now we can guess, and I know guys that are really good at, have been doing this a long time, and can say, yeah, an 8-inch will carry this, and they know. But the only way you know for sure is make static pressure. And if you're using flex for a return, nobody knows. It's a guess. Because one thing, once you start drawing air through flex, it gets smaller. Because it sucks all that plastic in. So your diameter gets smaller. And then every time you turn it or do anything, now your static pressure builds up. I get in this fight daily with people. Oh, I got plenty of return. Well, no, you don't, because you're getting V3 air codes and your motor's working too hard. Check static. Oh, my static is fine. That's not the answer. You tell me your static is fine, and I may hang the phone up on you. Okay? We have to look at these things. Okay? The days are gone. And you're gonna see something over the next 7 or 8 years. You're gonna start seeing companies go out of business because they simply cannot cover their labor costs because they have too many callbacks. Okay. We have to make sure when we're installing, especially when we're doing change outs, that we're looking at all this. And if you go put in a high-end piece of equipment, like say an S-Series or a cube inverter, and you're putting this thing in as a change out, and that homeowner won't let you fix the ductwork and all the things you need to do to make sure it's gonna work properly, don't sell the damn unit. Because you're not gonna make any money, because you're gonna get inundated with callbacks. Right? If you don't do something stupid, you can't lose money. The guy's time is our lifeblood. Every time we have to go out and do something for free, that's cutting yourself like blood right out of the ground. Right? So we have to be mindful. We have to educate our customers. And if that customer doesn't want to be educated, if they said that their buddy in Arizona said he didn't have to do that, just leave. Just tell them, I'm sorry, go find somebody else. Yeah, just tell them leave. And you had this conversation a month ago in the field. Just tell them no. No, we're not doing this. Okay? Because it's gonna do nothing but hurt you in the end. And it not only does it hurt you, it hurts us. Because it makes, nobody ever, no homeowner ever thinks, oh, well, the AC contractor didn't install the unit right. They always think it's the unit's problem. And a lot of technicians have a bad habit of shooting their mouths off about, oh, well, this unit's junk. Guys, everybody's units, except Nordyne's, are about the same. Hell, most of them have all the same parts in them. Right? There's variances here or there. Nobody's equipment is really better than anybody else's, except Nordyne's. But it doesn't, all the way across the board. I have friends that work for Train. In fact, one of my best friends in the world is exactly what I do for Train. I have friends that work for Lennox, I have friends that work for Carrier. We all talk to each other all the time, and it's the same thing. It's not the equipment. I mean, yeah, every now and then you'll get something come out with equipment that's messed up, but it's usually across the board. Like it'll be an entire production line of equipment that's got something messed up in it. But we call you and tell you, hey, if you're putting this stuff in, watch this, because this could be a problem. Like capacitors after COVID, what did we tell everybody? Jerk those tame fun capacitors out and throw them in the garbage and replace them because they're not gonna last you. You have things like that happen. But guys, 99% of problems that we see in the field are install related. And of that 99%, 90% of those are ductwork. So we've got to make sure that we are dealing with ductwork problems. Anybody that ever tells you that an ECM motor overcomes bad ductwork, after you punch them in the nose, please give them my phone number so I can educate them, because that is exactly the opposite. Any other questions?
Size of line set? Coming back to the refrigerator? As far as-
Yeah, there are spec line sets, sizes. They're not as bad as you're probably thinking they are. With our S series, they're pretty light, actually. But guys, from now on, if you're putting in a 5-ton single or 2-stage, you might as well plan on changing your section line out the engine. Across the board, it don't matter whose name we're on. Especially if it's 454, you're probably gonna be changing engine rate 3.5 times.
That'll work.
We've gotta pay attention to this stuff, guys. So when you sell a job and you know you're gonna sell a piece of equipment, call Aaron, call me, pull the specs, hey, what size copper is the same? Because you don't wanna get out there and get stuck and have a unit not work, and then one of us come out and be like, boy, you gotta change the copper, because guess you have to pay for it now. Yeah, you do.
Do you have a catalog with all this information?
It's all on the Amana website.
Yeah, you can get the Amana website, and if you have price books,
Is it the process? Not the line set, but it's all on the website.
if you go to AmanaHAC.com, if you're in the field on your telephone, you can pull specs right there for every piece of
Do you
equipment.
know what the common size of this truck would be?
You know, a lot of them haven't changed much. So I want to get back to, do any of y'all do business with one of the competitors like Train, Carrier, Lennox, or one of their subsidiaries? I know they all have a bunch of brands. And I know you deal with American Standard a little bit, but anybody else go with one of those other 3 major brands? There you go, pretty little people. So a lot of the myths or misconceptions that are being put out there is, I mean, y'all don't have a lot of those questions. Yesterday we did, and then the class a couple weeks ago we did, because people do business with different people. One of them is that R454B, R32 is at 660-ish on the GWP scale, and R454B is at like 460-ish on the GWP scale.
It's like 498.
Yeah, and what they're pushing, the agenda that they're pushing is that in 2029, they're gonna lower the GWP again.
Because they can't.
Right, they can't, but they've given up on that argument.
They can in 2032.
So, the initial GWP drop, so if everybody remembers, if you're in the business, when we went from R22 to R410A, that was strictly based on ozone depletion levels. So clap it up, y'all save the ozone, we don't use 410 anymore. Now they said, you know what, we've learned that the ozone can rebuild itself. We're not so worried about ozone anymore. Now we have to worry about global warming. So they lowered the GWP from 2200 of what it was initially with R22 and R410A to 700. That's a huge difference. That's the equivalent of telling the City of Houston Municipal Board that 80% of your citizens have to start recycling. mandatory. 80% of the city has to start recycling. That is a huge, how hard would that be, right? Just like how hard it is right now for us to switch from 410 to R32. What the other brand is proposing is that they're gonna drop it from 700 to 500. I believe there will be a drop, like Hunter says, I believe there will be a drop. But to go from 700 to 500 is the equivalent of them saying, hey, Claudio, in your neighborhood, there's 600 houses, at least 2 of them have to start recycling. What impact does that make? Nothing, right? Also, the initial argument they have was that it's gonna happen in 2029. The EPA has to let us know 7 years in advance. 2029 is less than 7 years.
The other thing is, the EPA can't make that decision anymore, Congress.
And all the Act, and all these big tree hugger groups have to all agree on it.
That's the thing is all those tree hugger groups have no power.
So.
This is the big thing about Chevron deference being kicked out, like, people really don't understand how big the deal that really is.
So the argument of it going from 700 to 500, I think that's nothing. I think it's gonna be more like what Hunter said, it's gonna go from 700 to 200, and that'll be in the late 2030s, in my personal opinion, by the time they have the data and the science behind it to find an alternative. There's a lot of people doing crazy things, with CO2, with ammonia, with, alcohol, with ether, with, even sound vibration. They're able to transfer heat through sound. It's some weird stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on. People
We
are,
used to have an ammonia system back in the
yes,
eighties.
that was the first refrigeration
Well, if
system.
you own a travel trailer or anything like
That was
that, you probably
refrigerators.
own a
Yeah.
Refrigerators back then.
In Meyerland, there were homes with ammonia systems.
With
Yeah.
refrigerator.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot
I
of
used to work on those
process
back in the
with
90s.
ammonia.
So,
Yeah, scary shit too.
why do y'all think, so, and I'm gonna be honest, and this, Daikin is the only one doing R32 in North America.
I was gonna ask that question, why is it Daikin only? Because,
So-
just because of the patent?
I wanna ask you, why do you think that Daikin is the only one doing R32 in North America? You said maybe because of a patent?
I know they hold the patent for R32.
So that's a misconception. R32 has no patent, and any chemical manufacturer is allowed to build, or to produce R32 right now. Anybody that is approved to create refrigerant right now can make R32 today. R454B is 2 components.
2 blends.
You have R1234YF that Honeywell holds the patent on, and you have the specific blend that Chemours owns the patent on. So there's 2 hands in that pot. And there's only 3 companies in North America that are allowed to produce their refrigerant right now. So you have one refrigerant, R32, that literally anybody can make as long as you're certified to build refrigerant. And you have one that only 3 manufacturers in the entire continent are allowed to produce. Who do you think has more price control? R32 is gonna be a lot more stable cost in the marketplace, being that anybody can make it.
Well, as long as they stop striking on top.
Yeah, the dock thing is gonna hurt us for a month or so, but we'll see what that
Maybe
turns.
even more.
Yeah, I mean, just 1 week of the dock being shut down has a huge ripple
Huge,
effect.
huge.
But you have another refrigerant that is literally only made by 3 people. They control the price entirely. So Daikin and the rest of the world, I'm only talking North America, but like Hunter had the slide up there. The entire world uses R32.
Right.
Every manufacturer across the globe. Here in North America, or here in the United States specifically, we love it, we hate it, we're a capitalistic society. We're more focused on driving the pockets of the rich. Here in North America, you have Carrier and Lennox. I haven't seen it from Train, but you have Carrier and Lennox beating the R454 drum that this is the next greatest and latest thing. It is the right choice. But if you look up, and just like the video I said about Daikin earlier on YouTube, if you Google Carrier and Lennox in Europe, Google Carrier, Europe, R32, Lennox, Europe, R32, they have campaigns talking about why R32 is the best refrigerant in the world. You know why? Because R454B is not allowed to be sold in Europe and Australia. Because of that component that we talked about, 1234YF, that's Honeywell holds the patent on, you are not allowed to use that in Europe and Australia because they determined that it's a forever chemical. Whereas R32, once it gets into the atmosphere, it dissipates over time. The other component of R454B, 1234YF, is a forever chemical in countries like Europe and Australia, who typically lead the wave on greenhouse initiatives. They have said, we don't want that chemical in our country, and starting next year, you're not allowed to use 1234YF in Europe and Australia.
Now, this may end up having a real effect on us, because California is already looking at banning 1234YF.
Is that it?
Every everybody's,
Yeah.
y'all may be like, oh, no, I'm like, hell yeah, please do. Because that's gonna jack my sales too.
We just wanna do what's right, and if you just are looking at true, not speculation, not slander, 1234YF is outlawed in those two continents, Australia and Europe. R32 is used in over 200 million compressors. It's everywhere. They've been using R32 since 2012, well, initially in 2007, but it's become the global standard since 2012.
No, it's been being used since the late nineties.
Yeah, somebody invented it, I think in the 50s or 60s, but wide use, 90s, it's the global standard in 2012. Would you go with a unit that has 200 million compressors across the globe, or go with the refrigerant that today, right now, does not have a single system in the marketplace? There is not a single R454 system in the marketplace. And here in Houston alone, we've already sold hundreds of them.
Yeah.
Globally, they've sold hundreds of millions of them. You're taking a chance on a product that's already been outlawed in the continents, and there's no track record, there's no proof of the performance. R32, we have the data that shows you have an R32 4-ton system, and you have an R410A 4-ton system. This one produces 16% more BTUs with a 40% less charge. So with 60% of the amount of refrigerant, 60% of the amount of refrigerant, and 16% more performance with a single component refrigerant that has no patent. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. I hope to y'all it's a no-brainer. Some of the other things that we actually see on the shelf right now, since it uses 60% less refrigerant with a 16% boost in performance, the units are smaller. Now, who likes bigger units? Nobody, right? You gotta take down fence pickets, you gotta take down frames of attics. Our 4-ton system now has a C cabinet coil that rates. Our 4-ton system, our 3.5-ton and used to all be D cabinets, which I know if there's installers in the room, y'all love D cabinet coils, right? No, nobody does.
Are they gonna have accurate compressors in them?
Okay, well, what do you mean by accurate compressors? I hear this all the time, I wanna hear what.
From my understanding, you have to go a ton higher, a half a ton higher to get the correct size for a unit.
So what you're talking about is the
BTU
actual
output.
BTU output opposed to what we're tonnage we're calling.
Correct.
It is going up some. But never in the history of air conditioning has a 60,000 BTU system produced 60,000 BTUs. The late, or sensible load. Now what happened with 410, and there were two different factors in this. We first saw the drop of the change of 410. We saw it. It went down to that 54 to 55,000 BTU range from about 56 to 58. Then what really, the next thing that killed it is when all the manufacturers started putting dryers in their outdoor units. So once you put a dryer outside, that kills your performance even more and lessens your BTU output. So there were a lot of factors involved in this thing. And one of the things I get a lot is, well, that's a 3-ton compressor and it's got a 31,000 BTU compressor. That's not how this works. The amount of energy beam that you can transport is only affected about 20 to 30% by the size of your compressor. I can take a 1-ton compressor, and if I can put a big enough coil on it and enough refrigerant, it can produce 60,000 BTUs worth of energy. So when you start talking about these lowering outputs, there were two big effects from it. Number one was the government. It changed the way the compressors had to work, all these motors, all this other stuff was the first one. And then putting dryers in the units, because having a dryer outside is always gonna lower your capacity 100% of the time.
Besides the one that's on the section line already?
No, you don't have suction line dryers. You have
Or
liquid line dryers.
whatever.
You don't, no, there's, inside all of our units, we have liquid line dryers, except our inverter products. Every manufacturer in the United States, on their 1 and 2 stage, puts dryers inside their units. You shouldn't be adding a second dryer when you're installing a system. That's the really gonna throw everything. The reason they do that is frankly, because they don't think you're gonna do your job. People do not change dryers out when they open the systems up to the atmosphere. So their idea is, well, if you're pumping it down, at least the dryer never actually sees atmosphere. It was one of the dumbest things that we could have ever done in this industry because it lowered BTU output. So Last night, I went through all of the on-market 32 stuff, doing parts, compressors, everything else. There was something else I had going on last night. And I'm seeing, like, your 3-ton has like a 34,000 BTU compressor in it. Your 4-ton has like a 47,000 BTU compressor, what we're calling rated compressors. So we're actually seeing that rating going up some because we're using less refrigerant, there's less friction, there's a lot of factors involved in that. The sheer volume of refrigerant helps because we're not having to push nearly as much refrigerant as we were with 14A. So there's all kinds of factors involved in this that really, a lot of it, the manufacturers have no control over. It's all government regulation, SEER. If you put a 60,000 BTU compressor in a 5-ton unit, a single stage, it would almost be 100% impossible to get 14 SEER. No way to do it. Unless you had a condenser coil the size of the package. So, again, this is not, and I don't mean it's not anybody, it's not Train, it's not Carrier, it's not us. These are the rules that we have to follow for this stuff that causes all these problems. So a lot of people complain about, well, you know, I hear it out of the Carrier, because Carrier's BTU outputs are really low. But, you know, I tell them the same thing, hey, that Carrier piece is a good piece of equipment, but they're having to do what they, you know, build what they have and what they've got to meet energy regulations. It's not the manufacturers, not any of them, not us, not anybody else, it's the government. It's the government causing all of this stuff. The government has done more than the HVAC industry in the last 25 years.